Okay, so today we're going to be going over chapter 13, which is entitled Divorce, Single Parent Families, and Blended Families. Some of the objectives throughout this lecture, we're going to take a look at what's known as marital burnout, divorce laws, talk about single parent families, and also blended families. Prior to a divorce, there's usually a lot of relationship issues and relationship problems. So even though this says marital burnout, you could even look at it as relationship burnout. You don't have to be married to be experiencing these types of things. So in your relationship, if you are experiencing one or several of these, it may be somewhat of a warning sign that there may be some issues that need to be talked about or addressed, or possibly even go and see a professional to get an objective third-party perspective on your problems. So let's get started. First thing is that small irritations become big issues. So in a lot of relationships, small things just aren't a big deal. But when the littlest things start to really get under your skin and they blow up, it may be a sign that there are some big issues that really need to be talked about and need to be addressed. If your personal interests start to become before your relationship and you start thinking more about yourself than your significant other or your relationship, there may be some issues there. It doesn't mean that you don't need to be a whole person and take good care of yourself. I mean, you definitely should. But this is at a point where you are thinking about only what's good for you and thinking less about what's good for the relationship. So that could be a telltale sign that somebody's pretty unhappy in a relationship. The next one is you no longer talking about sensitive issues. Anytime you stop communication, stop talking, even stop arguing, that could be a bad sign. It could be a sign that one of you feels that you're not being heard, that your concerns are not being validated, and so you're just not talking anymore. Or it may be that the person has stopped caring, and so there's really no use in arguing. They don't want to argue anymore because they don't care enough to even have that argument. So silence sometimes can be the killer of a relationship, because even though you're not arguing, you're also not talking and you're not communicating. And if you're not talking to your significant other, you may be inclined to start talking to other people, and that can open up a whole mess of problems. The next one is you start avoiding each other. No longer going out together, no longer doing things together, staying late at the office. This is also a sign that you're probably emotionally disconnecting from one another, and that can be really dangerous for a relationship. If one of you or both of you starts self-medicating with alcohol or drugs to escape the relationship, it may temporarily feel good. It may temporarily allow you not to think about the problems, but when you sober up, the problems are still there. And unfortunately, if you start medicating with drugs and alcohol too much, then you might actually create a new problem on top of it. So not only are you not addressing the real relationship issues, now you're possibly dealing with addiction. And that's not good either. And lastly, you start confiding in other people instead of your spouse. Now, there's nothing wrong with talking to other people and having friends and relationships, but if you start to disconnect emotionally from your partner and you open yourself to talk to other people, it could possibly lead to an emotional affair, which then could possibly lead into a physical affair. So marital burnout and relationship burnout are some serious issues, and they really need to be addressed rather sooner than later. So what do couples fight about? All kinds of things, but probably the two big ones is going to be money and sex. Um, so money, if you have financial problems, if you're living in poverty, that can be very stressful in a relationship. If one person is good with money and the other person is very irresponsible with money, if you're not on the same page with how to make money, how to manage money, how to invest money, what money should be used for, it can cause a lot of fights and a lot of arguments. The next one is going to be sex and intimacy issues. Sometimes people are not sexually compatible with each other. They don't have a very strong line of communicating what they want regarding intimacy. And so if there's a lack of communication and honesty, it can cause a lot of issues. And whenever people are unsatisfied in their intimate relationship, unfortunately, sometimes it can lead to infidelity or cheating, people stepping out of their relationship or stepping out of their marriage. So sexual compatibility and good communication is really critical in every relationship. The next one is parenting disagreements. Sometimes parents will disagree on politics, religion, discipline, how to raise children, so that can cause some problems. Another issue may be social media issues. There may be addictions to social media, addictions to phone, addiction to technology, addiction to pornography, and that can sometimes drive a wedge between people. If they're not talking and they're spending all their time gaming, they're spending all their time on their phone and they're not communicating and talking to each other, it's easy to lose connection with each other. This is also dangerous because it can also lead to an escape. So just like you can use drugs and alcohol to escape problems, you can also use social media, binge watching, gaming to escape as well. And even though it may be a temporary enjoyment, it doesn't address the problem. The problem is still there, and when you ignore problems, they do not go away. They typically just get worse. And it can create loneliness in a relationship. People feel like they're not being heard, and so that can definitely be an issue. Whenever people feel like they're not being heard or they're not given the attention that they need, that can cause some real problems. And all these problems can sometimes accumulate and turn into a separation or even a divorce. So let's talk about the process of divorce. A lot of times when you think about divorce, you think about going to lawyers, filing for divorce, drawing up contracts for the divorce and child custody, going to court, pleading your case, and eventually having the judge sign off on it. Well, that's true, but there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of layers to divorce. There's a lot of things that go on that are pretty tough, and it's a big hill to climb. So let's talk about that. Couples, they become emotionally and physically distant from each other. They may, like I mentioned earlier, stop communicating, stop hanging out. They're almost like roommates living together. They may be even sleeping in separate rooms. If they start to separate their assets, or if one of the two starts opening up banking accounts without the other one knowing, checking accounts or maybe even savings accounts, to start saving money to actually file for divorce or to pay for lawyer fees. Splitting up the money, separate phone bills, separate everything. You're basically dismantling the relationship from a financial type of perspective. And that can be tough, because it's one of those first steps to everything kind of falling apart, is separating assets. Another step is you may start talking to friends and family and kind of letting them know what's going on, and if you decide to kind of go through it, and you're pretty confident that you're going to go through a divorce, whether both of you want it or one of you want it and the other one doesn't, you're probably going to have a conversation with your children and let them know and sit them down what's going on. What's really important here is just trying to make it age appropriate and let them know that it's not their fault and that you love them very much, and you're going to do everything you can to work together to make it as easy as a transition as possible. But it's tough on kids. And then later on, as time goes by, the couple, they work on letting go of the past, kind of rebuilding a new life, a new identity. They realize that being divorced, they may start at some point moving into possibly dating, and hopefully the couples will work together to start effectively co-parenting in two separate homes, and doing that in a very positive way where they don't talk bad about each other and they keep it positive and amicable, which is always going to be the best thing for the children. Let's take a look at divorce custody, and divorce rates, things like that. So divorce rates, those are the number of divorces per year per 1,000 people. So overall, divorces has been steadily going down in the United States for several decades, primarily because marriage rates have been going down for several decades. Instead of people getting married, a lot of people are staying single longer, and they're also cohabitating longer as well. So that has a direct effect on marriage rates, and it also has a direct effect on divorce rates. Divorce rates are probably some of the highest among teenagers. There's just a lot of difficulties that teenagers face whenever they're married. They don't have a lot of world experience. There's usually a lack of maturity. Their brain isn't fully developed until 25, so thinking about the forethought of actions is really kind of absent there. They tend to be much more impulsive than older people. If they're getting married because they have a baby, that's another big stressor there. If they're teenagers, most likely, maybe they have a high school degree. A lot of teenagers that get pregnant and get married, sometimes they drop out of high school, and so that can just kind of perpetuate poverty, which makes things even worse. So not to say that teenagers can't have a wonderful marriage and a wonderful life. There's just a lot of obstacles in the way. It can be really, really tough. So it's going to be important that they have a really strong network of family members and friends to really kind of help them navigate that. Divorce rates are higher in the South, the southern states, compared to the northern states. A big factor in that is that marriage rates are much higher in the South than the North. It might be tied to the Bible Belt and religion. Some people, they don't want to have premarital sex, and for some of them, a factor in that is getting married. And if you get married, then there's no issue with having premarital sex. So teen marriages are higher in the South than the North. So there's kind of a direct effect. When you see marriage rates go up, you see divorce rates go up. Next, let's take a look at divorce laws. There's two major types of divorces. You have a traditional divorce law, which means that somebody files for divorce and one person is deemed to be at fault. And so in a traditional divorce, which was usually the way it was for a long time up until the late 1960s, 1970s, into the 80s, you basically had to go to court, file for divorce, and you had to convince the judge that a divorce was in the best interest of the relationship and the best interest of the family. So you may file on abuse or abandonment, issues with drugs, alcohol, infidelity, and so somebody had to be at fault. As we kind of transitioned into 70s and 80s, more and more states, they started to move away from traditional divorce, and they started to incorporate what's called no-fault divorce. And it's just that. Nobody's at fault. You may file under irreconcilable differences. You just feel like you don't want to be together anymore. So no-fault divorce has made divorce less taboo A little bit easier, probably a little bit faster as well, because you don't have to really prove anybody is at fault. So when it comes to no-fault divorce, there's usually two categories of no-fault divorce. You got those states that have a waiting period, like Arkansas, and you have those states out there that do not have a waiting period. So for the states that do not have a waiting period, the moment that they can file for a no-fault divorce automatically. And sometimes those divorces can go through very quickly, sometimes in as little as 30 days. But in the state of Arkansas, they have a requirement that you have to be separated for a year and a half or 18 months, and you have to be able to prove that. So whether it's some sort of bill showing that you're living somewhere else, and you typically also have to bring a witness to court to say that you've been separated. And so with a no-fault divorce, you don't really have to get in the weeds and talk about why you're getting the divorce and what he did and what she did and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to really go there, because remember, nobody's at fault. But what that means is, since Arkansas requires an 18-month separation, that if you do not do the 18-month separation, that means that you will have what's called a traditional divorce. So you will have to talk about those things and in order to get your divorce approved. As of right now, the state of Arkansas and the majority of states have moved to favoring joint legal and joint physical custody. Joint legal is where both parents have legal say-so in regards to the children, such as their education and their medical needs. Joint physical basically shows that both parents will have visitation with the children. For some people, it may be the best scenario for them to stay primarily with mom and see dad more on the weekends and every other week. Sometimes it's just the opposite, where they stay with the dad primarily during the week and see mom on the weekend. But there's also another option, that if the parents, they live relatively close to each other, then children can go to the same school and they can split custody 50-50. And that's something that the state of Arkansas does support, 50-50 joint legal and 50-50 joint physical custody. And what that means is that no parent has primary custody over the child, and the other parent's not considered the custodial. They're considered equal parents in the eyes of the law. And more states are moving towards that, because they believe that's what's truly in the best interest of the child, has more to do with the environment that they are raised in, and really not so much the biological sex of the parent. Take a look at this next chart here, going back to 1950 to 2020. It kind of shows, I had mentioned a little bit earlier how the divorce rate's been going down for decades, and you can kind of see this where it kind of spiked pretty high in 1980 and steadily been going down. And this is exactly the same time that cohabitation rates skyrocketed during this time. So as marriage rates started to be replaced by singlehood and cohabitation, that's the reason why this trajectory is on the decline, and it's been steadily going down for years and years. And the thing that we've learned in this class is that cohabitation rates continue to go up. Singlehood rates continue to go up. So it makes sense that the trajectory of these divorce rates would also go down as well, because marriage rates are going down. On this map of the United States, it shows in the very dark red, these are the states that have some of the highest divorce rates in the country. And Arkansas actually has one of the highest divorce rates in the country. And it's primarily a big factor in it is that it has a very high marriage rate. So anytime we see marriage rates going up, we see divorce rates go up. And I mentioned earlier that that divorce is more common in the South than in the North, and you can actually see it. You can actually see it right there. Teenage pregnancy is more of an issue in the South than the North, and that can be a big contributing factor of marriage, especially if you come from a conservative religious family. There may be some pressure to go ahead and get married. Poverty is a factor. Less educated. All factors in divorce, all of them. But this particular chart here, these are the states with the most divorcees at the age of 30. And as you can see here, Arkansas actually has the highest percentage of divorcees at the age of 30 years old. Moving on, let's take a look at single-parent families. They have risen dramatically. They've gone up significantly. Fewer people are getting married. A lot of people are staying single longer. Having children out of wedlock, teen pregnancy, divorce, all of these are factors, all of them, in single-parent families. So it's estimated that about 1/3, or 24 million children living in this country live in a single-parent family. So think about that. 1 in 3. 1 in 3. So for every 3 children that you see, most likely statistically one of those is in a single-parent family. A lot of times it's going to be with a single mother, and so they're living on one income. So they're also at a higher likelihood of living in poverty as well. So about 30% of single-parent households live in poverty. And there's also an increased risk of child molestation whenever a single parent starts dating a new partner. So you got to be really careful who you bring around your children. If you're a single parent or if you're dating somebody, and that's the main reason why that your divorce decree in the state of Arkansas states that you're not supposed to have somebody of a romantic relationship stay the night with you whenever you have your children with you. The reason they do that is to protect the children, because they know statistically that the odds of a child being physically abused or sexually abused rise significantly whenever one of the parents starts dating, or if there's a step-parent involved. We have another map of the United States, and if you take a look down there at the southeastern part of the country, it shows that the much higher percentage of single-parent families, which makes sense because this is the region of the country that also has a lot of issues with divorce as well. So the southeastern part of the country, a lot of single-parent families, again, divorce, teenage pregnancy, having kids out of wedlock, a lot of different factors there. So that moves us into what's known as blended families. So we don't call them really step families anymore. We call them blended families because you have 2 separate families that are kind of blended and come together. So more and more kids are being raised with a stepmom or a stepdad and stepbrothers and stepsisters and half-brothers and half-sisters. So that's basically what a blended family is. You're bringing children from a previous relationship into a new relationship or marriage situation. Statistically, divorce rates rise with each new marriage. And the main reason is that statistically your first marriage is usually the most successful. And this primarily because you haven't gone through a divorce, you don't want to go through a divorce, and you also have kids usually with your first husband or your first wife. And you don't want to put them through that. So each time you get remarried, you've survived divorce, you probably don't have children with your second significant other or your third significant other. So it's just a lot easier to pull the trigger and just get divorced. It gets easier each time. There's also, just like with single-parent families dating, there's also an increased risk of sexual and physical abuse of the non-biological children, typically occurring from the stepfather, more so than the stepmother. So it's really important for step-parents to really kind of slowly and patiently move into those parental roles. And the main objective is just to establish a relationship with your stepchildren and understand that you're not dad, you're not mom, and that you're in more of a, if their mom and dad are still, or biological parents are in the picture, you take on more of a role, a mentoring position, and the main thing is just establishing trust and respect and emotional connection with the child. and sometimes that can take time. Effective co-parenting skills is also important. It's really important for the biological parents to work well together, to not talk bad about each other, to not try to bring the kids in the middle of arguments and try to use them as pawns to punish each other. The best indicator for children to really transition through a divorce is really how well the parents get along. And if the parents get along well, then the child is much more likely to feel safe and transition through a co-parenting situation.